One, we are live. Hello, everybody. Yay! It's a party in the chat room. So let's see. We're going to take a roll call. No, it's a minute till roll call time, so we better not start up yet. But with any luck, we're going to find out. Steve's dad is going to show up in the live chat room. I don't know if he's going to do it or not, but Steve talked to him this afternoon, showed him how to get in. And wasn't it his idea, Steve?
Well, he asked about it, so I thought I'd kind of fill him in on how to do it.
You think he's going to be able to pull it off?
I'm not sure.
But if he does, this is really important. It's his 81st birthday, so check it out.
Today.
I would like to point out this giant, let me put my mic over here. It's covering up this giant roses from Steve. It is our 33rd wedding anniversary coming up this coming weekend, but we celebrated this weekend. So we have giant flowers from Steve. I don't think you realized they were going to be that big, did you?
No, not quite. Not quite.
All right, it is now time for roll call. Let's see. We've got Steve and Brett and Kevin and Dan and Giblies, Dorothy, NC19562, which Steve thinks isn't his dad, but I think it is. And Sandy just snuck in, it looks like. All right, Google Hangout is live. So if he does make it in, it is his 81st birthday. So we want to make sure we give him a good howdy do. What? Are you laughing? What are you laughing at, Steve?
Nothing.
Kevin saying you're a man of great patience. All right, let me do a test recording here. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeed.com. And Kevin is a big poo-poo head. Okay, there we go. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeed.com. And Kevin is a big poo-poo head. Okay, good.
That came through loud and clear, especially the Kevin part.
Glad we got that on the recording. Everybody could hear that? All right. Richard in, I always get stuck, Alaska? AK is Alaska, right, Steve?
I think so.
He works in the poo-poo business,
or
so
Arkansas.
all is good. Well, that's why I always get stuck. Don't tell me that. I'm pretty sure it's Alaska. All right, let's go.
Fairbanks.
Fairbanks, that's right. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. All right. Here we go. Boy, it'd be so nice if I put that there. Maybe I will just put it there. I could do this. That would work. All right. Here we go. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Macintosh bias. Today is Sunday, March 6, 2016, and this is show number 565, and it is also Steve's dad's 81st birthday. We're all waiting in the live chat room. There's a reasonable chance he might show up in there for the first time. That would be really cool if he does. Well, this week's Chit Chat across... Okay, I'm stopping and starting over. I'm sorry. I didn't like where I started. Geography major. Okay, good. Oh, actually,
While you're at it,
yeah.
Could you fix the little tie on your hoodie?
Oh, is the tie messed up?
One of them is.
Is that bothering you?
Yeah, put them inside your the wires so you don't hang yourself.
Is that better?
Better.
This is the man who makes sure I brush my hair before I do the live show. Actually, you didn't remind me today.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right, we're going to try this again. All right. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Macintosh bias. Today is Sunday, March 6, 2016, and this is show number 565. Well, March 6 happens to be Steve's dad's 81st birthday, and he might just show up in the live chat room today, so we are all waiting to see if we see him show up. Be pretty darn cool if he did. Steve taught him how to do it this afternoon, and because he said he wanted to learn about it, so that's pretty cool. Well, this week's Chit Chat Across the Pond was episode 10 of Bart's Programming by Stealth series. I had so much fun in this episode. He taught me how to make little piggy faces for bullets on unordered lists. I don't think he intentionally wanted me to make piggy faces, but that's what I chose to learn from him. I got to tell you, it was a really, really fun lesson, but I also had an epiphany in the middle of the night about it. Usually epiphanies turn out to be really dumb when you wake up fully, but this was actually a really good idea. It occurred to me that I can very easily make the programming by stealth portion of Chit Chat Across the Pond its own separate podcast feed. So right now, when I'm done recording an episode of Chit Chat Across the Pond, here's what I have to do. I open up Feeder, the tool I use to create the feeds for the different shows. I create a new item in the Chit Chat Across the Pond feed. I write up a little blurb for the show in the episode description for your, that's what shows up in the episode description on your podcatcher. Then I enter the URL where the audio file is stored, and I paste in the URL for the blog post. So I could easily create another feed for just the every other week episodes that are programming by stealth, drag that new item into that second feed every other week. I think I'd change the blog post to Bart's site, though, so people wouldn't have to go to my site and then get redirected over bartb.ie/PBS each time. So a couple of copy and paste, and I'd be good to go. Bart even already created a logo for PBS, so I just need to submit it to iTunes, and we'd have a separate podcast for PBS. Then I started thinking about the other every other week, and I got really tired because I didn't know what I would call that. Chit Trot Across the Pond without programming by stealth? Anyway, in any case, I think I'll go ahead with the PBS series as a podcast since it's easy to do, and maybe that'd be a way that people could get that whole series instead of waiting until the very end when we package it up. Let me know if you think this is a good idea. Great. Save. All right.
So Lindsay had trouble with the video. Can you see it now, Linz? Well,
Yeah, if she can't see you, she can't see you, dear. Who's Joan Rich? Joan Rich is new here, right? Do you think?
I think so.
Joan Rich, hello. Nice to meet you. Rose snuck in under the wire. Who else snuck in? Oh, Big in Virginia Poo-Poo Head. Oh, it didn't get the D. It's just Big in Virginia Poo-Poo Head. That's good. Oh, not new here. You've been here before. Okay.
Oh, well, welcome back.
Well, sorry, it's hard to remember everybody's names. Oh, there we go. Poo-Poo Head. Much better, Kevin. All right. Let's see. Here we go. The next section. There we go. All right. There we go. When Steve told me that they were going to broadcast live the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee hearing on Apple versus the FBI, or as I like to call it, the FBI against us, my first thought was that watching that would be kind of like volunteering for jury duty. I could not have been more wrong. Steve and I watched all 5 hours, and I was positively glued to my screen the entire time. Remember, we went down to have lunch, and we kept watching it on my iPad Pro so that we wouldn't miss anything. And I wouldn't even let Steve run the garbage disposal for 30 seconds because I didn't want to miss a minute of it. Well, before we dig in, let's make sure we all understand what the Judiciary Committee is. What does it have to do with the House of Representatives? And what are they doing chatting with the FBI and Apple? I am not a legal scholar, so I looked it up on Wikipedia. The U.S. House Committee on the Judiciary, also called the House Judiciary Committee, is a standing committee of the United States House of Representatives. It is charged with overseeing the administration of justice within the federal courts, administrative agencies, and federal law enforcement entities. Well, it sure sounds like they have the authority to figure out whether the FBI maybe took a wrong turn when they tried to use the courts to compel Apple to comply with their demands. The Judiciary Committee could question whether the use of the All Writs Act was appropriate, or whether perhaps the FBI should have worked with Congress to pass new law if that's what they wanted to do. There were a couple of things that impressed me about the hearing. First of all, you might think that 5 hours was excessive and that it was caused by people droning on and on with their opinions. That was absolutely not the case. Representatives got to question the panel members, but got precisely 5 minutes to ask their question and elicit the answers. In all cases but one, they came in at their designated time, and in several instances, they got done early and gave their time back to the committee. It was amazing. I found myself wishing I'd ever witnessed a meeting like this when I was working, because it was run so crisply, not at all what I expected of a government proceeding. The second thing that impressed me, which is much more relevant to our conversation in tech podcasts, is that for the most part, the representatives were extremely well informed on the topic at hand. They understood what encryption is and why it's important. And to be honest, that shocked me. It is a prevalent opinion in our tech tribe that our government representatives don't understand our world, and we're going to have to wait for them to die out before somebody comes in who will. I want to set up the framework of how the hearings work first and give you a little more of the highlights after I talk about that. There isn't a judge and a jury and witnesses. Instead, there's panel members who are called and questioned by the state representatives. The first panel had just one person in it. That was FBI Director James Comey. Most of the representatives seemed to be kind of grilling him, pushing hard on him that he had stepped out of bounds when he sought to compel Apple to create a tool to break their own security model. They forced him to admit that Apple had repeatedly helped them and been very responsive in this specific case. He stood his ground that it was only this one phone he was asking to break into, but did admit that there were others waiting in line before him, specifically by New York District Attorney Cyrus Vance. His name's going to come up later. One of Mr. Comey's responses was disturbing. In questioning whether Apple could do more to help, he said that some companies have business models that allow them to view user data in clear text, and that they're super useful to the FBI in comparison. Sort of sounds like Gmail he's describing, doesn't it? Anyway, the next thing he said was that he's never heard this business model described as insecure. Really? Director Comey seemed sincere, though, and answered the questions given him to the best of his ability. But it was surprising to me that he was not as well briefed on this as the representatives were. They clearly had a better technical understanding of the problem at hand than he did, sometimes leading him to say then have to answer that he simply didn't know the answers to their questions. I wasn't surprised that he didn't understand the intricacies of the topic, but rather I was surprised that the representatives did. Another concern in the tech sector is that our governmental representatives are too old to understand tech. People seem to believe that when we're old, we can't learn, which kind of gets under my skin. I personally think that as humans, we either have the tech bit flipped on or it's off, completely unrelated to age. Case in point, House Minority Leader John Conyers is 86 years old, and he started the discussion by saying, and I quote, "Strong encryption keeps us safe even as it protects our privacy," unquote. He went on to quote former FBI Director Hayden, who said that America is more secure with unbreakable end-to-end encryption. Conyers totally gets it. Now, he was reading a lot of his prepared statements, but later his questions showed that he was speaking from a depth of understanding of these issues. There were a couple of other sound bites in the questioning of Director Comey that I want to bring your attention to. In particular, I liked it when Representative Jason Chaffetz was questioning the wisdom of giving the FBI even more latitude than they have right now. And he said, referencing the Snowden revelations, "You won't even show us what you're doing now. Why should we let you do more?" Chaffetz didn't actually expect an answer to that question. Representative Jeffries made an interesting point. It was in the context of whether we should have a public discussion of our need for privacy. He said that if a user chooses a passcode, chooses not to back up to iCloud, and chooses to enable the feature to wipe the phone after 10 wrong tries, then that U.S. citizen has chosen privacy and security, which should be an indication of what the people want. In our Google Plus community over at podfeed.com/Google Plus, Mark Pauly said that it bothers him when people refer to this issue as privacy versus security, when in fact it's really security versus security. If we don't have privacy, we also lose our security. I had to applaud then when Representative Del Bene said that this is not a debate between security and privacy. It's a debate between security and security. I think Mark must have given her a call before the hearing and told her to say that. Director Comey was eventually dismissed after a couple of hours after profuse thanks for donating his time. Now, I draw your attention to that because they didn't thank anybody else for donating their time like the representatives from Apple. But anyway, he was thanked for donating his time. Then they brought up the second panel. This one was made up of three people. Bruce Sewell, who's the lead counsel for Apple, Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance that I mentioned earlier, and my favorite person at the hearing, Dr. Susan Landau. She has a PhD from MIT in cryptography and is a professor of cybersecurity policy at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Dr. Landau was pretty much the star of the panelists as far as I'm concerned. I think her strongest point was that our phones are a way for us to store login credentials and that theft of login credentials have the most to do with our national security. She explained that in December, the Ukrainian power grid was hacked through the use of stolen credentials. This point held significant weight in the context of a phone from a terrorist. If you're talking about stopping the power grid, That'd be a terrorist act, right? If stolen credentials can do that, and we store our credentials in our phones because we're using things like LastPass and 1Password, this is a really relevant point. Dr. Landau feels that the FBI has not pursued every avenue possible and that their excuse is that the other branches won't talk to them. She specifically cited the CIA as not sharing. She questioned whether the FBI had also adequately used their funding to create tools to pursue these technologies without trying to compel a private company to help them. When questioned by Representative Conyers about whether encryption existed before Apple came along, she said that she was amazed it took Apple so long to provide strong encryption. My second favorite person in this 5-hour miniseries was Representative Zoe Lofgren. I loved her because she actually read Dr. Landau's paper on cryptography. Ms. Lofgren did say that it was pretty dense, and some sections took her 2 or 3 reads each, but she asked that the paper be submitted into the record. She was awesome. Maybe she was showing off, but dang, that was kind of cool. Ms. Lofgren, after hearing about the option to turn on a 10-try password lockout during the hearings, she told the panel she had just enabled it. At one point, New York DA Cyrus Vance said that a conversation of an inmate had been recorded in which he said that encryption is a gift from God. Representative Jeffries pointed out the irony of this as a plea for more ways to track the bad guys, since they were able to record that very conversation. The only representative who didn't seem to be helpful in discovery throughout the hearings was Representative Gowdy. He kept asking Apple counsel Sewell, "What legislation have you brought forward to propose to solve this problem?" He was very frustrated that Apple wasn't providing that legislation. I get this frustration. It's like when you ask somebody, "Hey, where do you want to eat?" And they say no to everything. When you ask them to suggest something, they say they don't know or they don't care. I get that with food and other things, but I'm pretty darn sure that it is not Apple's job to suggest legislation during a hearing of the Judiciary Committee. But then again, I am not a legal scholar. Representative Gerald Nadler asked Dr. Landau whether allowing this backdoor to Apple products would keep bad actors from using any other end-to-end encryption tools. She answered no. He then asked, "So we're debating something undoable?" To which she simply said yes. Representative Lofgren also said, "This is a fool's errand. We will never be able to practically do what the FBI is asking us to do." These 2 statements were the most definitive statements in the entire 5 hours. My understanding, by the way, is that no particular decision will come of these hearings. This was an opportunity for the representatives to learn and to use that knowledge in the development of future legislation. They could file a brief in the case against against Apple by the FBI. I should say they could file a brief in that case of the Apple FBI case in California, but there's no guarantee that they would actually do that. There's also no guarantee that I know which way they would file a brief, which direction they would go. I'm so glad that I had the ability to watch the hearings, and I have to say the bottom line is that I'm encouraged that our representatives have such a deep understanding of a topic so very dear to our hearts. I hope this synopsis of the proceedings gives you hope as well. Save. All right. Have I missed anything? Did Grandpa come in?
Not yet. I don't think he's here.
Oh, shoot. All right. I'm reading. Oh, Brett got weird looks from his coworkers for listening to C-SPAN radio in his office. That's great. Yeah, I know Sandy we were in the chat room with Sandy and Brett. That was good. All right. Let's see. And then Kevin Poo-Poo Head blathered on and on. Yeah, I love Dr. Landau. Do you guys remember Will used to be on the show from time to time? He was on some other podcasts. He's been in college. He's actually going to school at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And I said that he should ask her to be on my show for me. And he said, "Hey, I'll try."
Wow.
Wouldn't that be crazy? I don't know if I'm smart enough to ask her questions.
We should have Bart on.
There you go. That's not a bad idea. All right. Next segment. Wouldn't that be cool?
It certainly would.
Oh, read what Sandy just said. If Grandpa doesn't show up, please pass along my best wishes for his birthday.
I will do that, Sandy. Thank you. We will certainly do that.
Very nice. But not if Kevin says that. Actually, you could take a picture of everybody saying happy birthday to him. If you guys want to say happy birthday to Grandpa, say it right now, and Steve could get a screenshot. That would be kind of fun. All right, here we go. In our Google Plus community over at podfeet.com/Google Plus, Tracy Bussels posted a problem with her main account on her Mac. For some unknown reason, on boot up, her account would freeze at the desktop picture. She did a ton of super geeky diagnostics and listed them all in Google Plus. And in the end, using Terminal Foo, she was able to fix her account. I love that she was able to solve it because she's so technically savvy, like many Nosilla castaways. Now, she knows I'm going to say this about her, and she said she's not that technically savvy, but you go read what she did and tell me that she's not. I bring this story up to illustrate the wisdom of a different path than what she did. She went through all of this work so that she wouldn't have to do a nuke and pave. For those who haven't heard the term before, a nuke and pave means you make up backup copies of your hard drive, you erase the entire disk inside your machine, and then you reinstall the operating system and finally put all your data back, but not all of your settings. Instead, setting up things one by one, installing apps one by one until you get it all working. She said in her notes that she'd had this account since 2007 and had only switched out one Mac in all that time back in 2010. I tried to encourage her to do a nuke and pave, but because she's so skilled, she was able to avoid that path. Now, I do need to point out at this point, I'm a hypocrite when I say you should do a nuke and pave when you get into trouble. Remember when I went through all that crazy work with Apple to figure out why iCloud wouldn't sync my keyboard replacements? My little friend James at Apple tried to convince me to do a nuke and pave on my MacBook Pro. In my defense, I did install everything from scratch on this Mac in January of 2014, so it's just over 2 years ago, not the 6 to 9 years it's been for Tracy. My hesitation was primarily because my setup is fairly complex for recording and because I have that giant 400 gigabyte photos library that I have to copy back and forth, so just to reinstall my data alone takes forever. But I still should have done a nuke and pave. I mentioned last week that my giant photos library takes up too much room and that I only had 26 gigabytes left on the internal 1 terabyte drive on my MacBook Pro. That prompted my purchase of the Samsung T3 1 terabyte external SSD. I just received it, but I haven't got it doing what I want yet, so that's actually a story for another time. My idea is to put my photos library over there, remember? In the meantime, though, I started thinking about why I only have 26 gigabytes left on that 1 terabyte internal drive. I know 400 gigabytes for photos is a lot, but where the heck is the other 600 gigabytes? Where did it go? Tracy and I happened to chat a bit on Twitter after I showed her the image of Disk Inventory X on last week's show. She suggested an application like Daisy Disk as another way to see where my disk space had run off to. Daisy Disk is like Disk Inventory X in that it shows you graphically where all of your data is. It's a great app as well, but I remember the other tool I often use to harvest disk space, the free Omni Disk Sweeper from omnigroup.com. Unlike Disk Inventory X and Daisy Disk, this one is not graphical. Instead, it allows you to drill down into your drive while it's still constantly showing you folders and files with the biggest hogs at the top. Seeing the biggest hogs in each folder is cool, but it also shows you the second biggest hog and the third biggest hog. So I'll be able to see what other than photos is taking up so much room. It seems like the Finder should be able to do this. You know, you can see by size inside folders in column view, but it doesn't measure the size of the folders themselves, so it's pretty much useless in discovery. Omni Disk Sweeper also drills down into system files, hidden libraries. Nothing can hide from its prying eyes. The first thing I discovered was that I had some crazy big cache files hanging around. Inside the user directory, there's a caches folder, and the top one that Omni Disk Sweeper found was 38 gigabytes, and it was called com.apple.bird. Now, common wisdom says that you can get rid of cache files, and they just get rebuilt if you needed them. This one got my curiosity up. I didn't find a lot of chatter online about this bird file, but I did find a few places saying it had to do with iCloud syncing. Gave me a little bit of pause, because as you know, I do care a lot about syncing things over iCloud. I hunted the Googles, and while everyone said it was okay to delete it, I decided to chat with AppleCare again. I pay for the service, so why not? The first woman asked me if I saw a red dot next to the folder. When I told her no, she said, go ahead and delete it. Yeah, but what is it? How are you sure? She tried to connect me with the next person up the chain, but she dropped the call, and even though she asked me for my phone number ahead of time to call me back if she drops the call, she didn't call me back. So I called them back, and I got the same kind of response. Then I got to up a level to someone I will call Charles in honor of Dorothy's poor answer from Charles on our iTunes Music. Charles, 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 Charles.